Governor Amuneke and Kevin Black comedy is, you know, you're a family man, you have yourself and other things. So how do you balance creating these contents and balance out your family and yourself? Have you faced, you know, burnout or creative pressure trying to keep up with the character? And, you know, what has been your family and your friends' reaction to the content that you make?
Well, they're happy with me. They're seeing that I'm getting recognition, and they're happy. They're happy, and they are supportive. But for everyone who has a family, you know what it is to have a family. You know, it's not easy to keep up with communication, because when I wake up is what am I doing next? What am I? Sometimes I forget that I even have a wife. I mean, she's somewhere here looking at me, wondering what I'm saying. But you know, sometimes I wonder. She is like try to remind me that you have a wife. You know, because after shooting, we have to go into the editing. And then we have to talk to a lot of people from different part of the world, trying to reach you for one reason or the other, trying to talk business, blah, 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 blah. It's just a normal day. It's a normal life for any hustler in Nigeria, average hustler or someone who is into business, you know, attending to business. That's what I do. But if of support, what I'm doing, it's 100%. It's 100%. Nobody comes to me and say, be careful, may they not go, because I'm being careful. I'm not calling any names. I'm not being direct and all of that. And I made them understand my part that, you know, I don't believe in fear. I don't believe in fear. They know it. I don't believe in fear. I don't believe that if you didn't do anything wrong, that something wrong can happen to you. So if at the end of the day, now this type of content, one take my life, it's what God has designed. So they understand that position, and nobody is scared. Nobody is saying, "Don't do this, don't do that." You know.
All right,
But
so much, Kevin. It's a pleasure having you join us. I truly enjoyed the conversation with you. Thank you for joining us.
thank you for having me.
Well, Lillian, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I mean,
Yes.
I think more creators should use their platforms to speak on things like this. Don't you think so?
Yes, I do think so, but then I had wanted to ask him the way forward, looking at, you know, the factors affecting the political issues in Nigeria. You know, we don't just, you know, look at the issues and portray it on social media. There should be a solution in mind.
Yes. Well, Kevin has made a name creative space in Nigeria. Well, make sure to stay tuned as the morning show continues with more interesting packages for you. For now, I am Uchenna Chimdi Oluoha.
And I am Lilia Gwali. Do have a great watch.
Bright and early. Signature TV. News in your pocket.
Health is more than a diagnosis. It's your lifestyle, your choices, and your future. Join us on Inside Health, your weekly deep dive into the stories, science, and solutions shaping your well-being. From expert interviews to real-life journeys of healing and hope, we cover it all.
One of the complications of cancer management or treatment is they have, some of them, at one point in time, you see them having anemia. Okay, so you see them at times being transfused. But at the same time, you come in with the diet.
Nutrition, mental health, innovations in medicine, fitness, and everyday wellness. Whether you're managing a condition, staying informed, or just living your best life, Inside Health is your trusted guide.
I'm Tigiti Agorum, and I'll be with you every week on Inside Health, only on Signature TV.
New every morning on Signature TV. We open the day for you with needed energy, information, and required vibes to shape your day. From sizzling snippets of stories in various areas of life to intriguing conversations with net worth guests.
When you have people who have no track record becoming your leaders, you have a problem.
There's no outstanding gratuity when Obi took over from me. I left, in all the accounts of Anambra State, 13.8 billion for him.
Your day cannot be complete without Signature Morning on weekdays and Signature New Day on weekends. There is no better way to start your day except Signature Morning and Signature New Day every day on Signature TV. We are local.
International communities observing
Why the main market is in chaos. People
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended say aye.
Aye.
We have taken the vote by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket. Bright and early as the day breaks, as the newspaper headlines trail the stories that shape the day. We at Signature TV trail the headlines that trail the day. We interrogate the headlines. We analyze the stories that make the headlines.
Wayek is overrated, and they even overrated themselves, and when you go see it, they are insensitive of some Nigerian children who have never had what it was.
With passion and emotion, we drive the conversation to change a narrative.
Let nobody be deceived by Nigerian high level of performing in agriculture export. We are still where we are.
Newspaper review on Signature TV every morning on Signature Morning, weekdays, and Signature New Day, weekends. Newspaper review on Signature TV. We do not just review the headlines, we make the headlines relevant to our daily lives.
Why the main market is in chaos. People
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended say aye.
Aye.
We have taken the vote by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Hello and thanks for joining us. I am Vin Martin Obiora Ilo in Abuja, Nigeria. Today in this special interview, my guest is a very distinguished Nigerian. He was born on the 29th of January 1944 in Kaba, Nigeria. He is a Nigerian who has consistently had an opinion in what happens in our country. He is Cardinal John Onayeko. Your Eminence, my pleasure to be talking with you again after so many years.
Thank you very much. Thank you for considering me still relevant to talk to.
Let me start by saying that you are in good health. I see you at airports, and I mean, it takes a lot of interrogation to know that you're already 81. Your Eminence, what's the magic? What has been keeping you in good health? What has been, I mean, you don't look 81 at all.
Well, if you had said this 3 weeks ago, I probably would have said yes. But 2 weeks ago, I really went down. And I was told that it was because of stress and overwork. And the doctors warned me to go easy. Well, as what do you mean by go easy? For as long as you can still move around, you move around. I'm actually right now still recovering from a bad first malaria, then other things that follow. The question of health, that's a matter of, it's normal now. At the moment we are 70 and above, we are ready for all kinds of health challenges until we find the big one that will send us to paradise.
I'm waiting for that. Yeah. But the important thing is that I do thank God that I am in relatively good health. I'm not bedridden. I'm not a heavy burden on my loved ones carrying me up and down. And I'm just praying to Almighty God not to have to go through that I could just walk my way gently from this wonderful earth of ours to a more wonderful world in the hereafter. You know, at my age, you must keep thinking about the hereafter.
So could we attribute, I know there's the God factor in good health.
Yes.
But can we attribute this to maybe exercises, the kind of food you eat, or the state of mind?
State of mind, good doctor who is dedicated, checking up on me, reminding me, advising me, take this, take that. I'm on regular medication. It seems to be the normal thing now for all old people like us. Regular medication to control sugar and blood pressure. At first, when you were on regular medication, it means that you are sick. And as good, she said, a young sister, but she said, area of competence is in gynecology, strangely enough. But she's done special courses for geriatric care. And she's making good use of that. Of course, she's not on alone. There's a whole lot of a few other consultants who know about my case and to whom she reports and who give their advice. So I'm in their hands, and I think they are handling me well.
Your Eminence, recently we had a new pope, and I understand you were part of the pre-conclave meetings and all that, but you had to return, you had to leave Rome because you had gotten to an age where you were not going to be part of the conclave. Mm-hmm. Tell me how you felt when this happened.
No surprise. I knew the law. I knew the laws. I knew the rules. Everybody knew the rules that once you've celebrated your 80th birthday, you can no longer participate in the conclave. no matter how important you think you are and how wonderful you think you are, and there were many others like me who also were in the same position. The rule is a good one because you can't be dragging a 90-year-old people into conclave. So I knew I was not going to be part of the conclave, but I knew that I had the right to be at the pre-conclave consistory. Consistories are where we spoke a lot about what is the church, and we got reports about how the church at that level is running, the kind of reports that we don't normally get. So that means you had an opportunity to put in and I put it in my own ideas about what I think was going on. You could say that it is a period where people give the idea about what kind of pope they wanted, realizing that the new pope was among those of us there at the meeting. Some people were perhaps more indicated than others, but nobody was sure
who it was going to be.
The pope, yes.
So, like the rest of us, you found out.
Yes,
maybe by watching
like
TV.
The rest of you. The journalists like you, they often have their own conclave, and they have their own pope even before any pope emerges. Yes. They had their various lists of people whom they said was going
could be.
Yes, but at the end of the day, it was Prevost who came as Leo the 14th. I didn't know him well. And when his name came up, they began to tell us about Pope, and therefore it's hardly anything you really want to be. Most people who get elected as Pope see it as a cross that is being put on their shoulders, which they accept as a will of God for them. As a cardinal, I knew I was qualified to be a pope, but I didn't go into the conclave saying rosaries or novenas that I may be the one to emerge. No, not at all. Not at all. And also at that level, I knew that unlike other elections, where you have candidates lined up, each one with manifestos and kind of
campaigns and what have you.
Because the conclave is not like that at all. Because the conclave is an election in which every elector is a candidate. It could be any of those of us gathered there. That was in the 2020, the election of Pope Francis.
Okay.
I was in that conclave. Yeah. Incidentally, that conclave took place a few months after Cardinal Arinze turned 80. So he couldn't join us. He was not with us. But Okoje was with us at that conclave. Even though he was a bit physically challenged, but he came on his wheelchair. Yes. But this last one, I crossed the 80 years, and I happily came back home and waited, prayed like the rest of the church for the Holy Spirit to guide the conclave.
You didn't know this Pope very well. But what challenges do you think his papacy may face? What challenges are popping up in the church and in society that will be part of the cross that he will bear?
Office. That kind of office. That kind of the ideas coming out from means wants to show that every pope is himself. He has no obligation to
be someone else,
to repeat, to be like his predecessor, no matter to be like his predecessor, no matter how popular or otherwise the person may be, because every pope is himself, and the pope, and being himself, he faces the challenges of the church with him, with his own charisms, with his own gifts and talents, and in his own way. And we have seen that. We have seen Pope John Paul II be Pope in a way that we didn't see a Pope be before. But we saw Pope Benedict XVI was not in any way like Pope John Paul II, but he responded to the needs of the church during the brief years he was there. And then Francis came out of the blues and behaved in a way that, what I always say is that Pope Francis finally made it such that even me, I can be Pope. In other words, you can be yourself. He took certain steps to show that the Pope can be himself. He doesn't have to fall into any line. For example, the fact that he refused to stay in the Apostolic Palace and just stayed in the hostel where bishops always stay when we go to Rome. And he spent his 12 years there. Throughout the 12 years was a pope. He was going to the Apostolic Palace for his official meetings and the audiences and so on. But he always returned there for his meals and for sleep. He met a few people once in a while in that place. But that's just one out of many ways he was a pope in his own way. This pope too is an Augustinian. It's interestingly now, these last two popes are religious. Pope Francis was a Jesuit, and this Prevost was an Augustinian, deep Augustinian, because he was a leader of the Augustinian order for 12 years. Because then we realized that he had lived in Rome for 12 years and had been familiar with the inner workings of the Holy See, which means when he became a pope, many of those things were not
very new to him.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to talk more about the church. But, your voice has always been an outstanding one when it comes to
is that so?
What happens in our country. And recently, in a number of speeches you made, you have criticized our government, and let me be very specific. You urged our president recently to understand the true struggles of Nigerians and implement policies that improve their well-being. You also signposted the challenges of the elderly. In April 2025, you decried the neglect, poverty, and isolation faced by many elderly citizens who once served the nation, calling it, in your own words, a disgrace, and urging society not to forget them. Let's look at the presidency of Tinubu and the presidency and the leadership that we have had in our country. When I spoke to you about a decade ago, you still talked about the challenges of everyday Nigerians. And decades after, these challenges are still facing us. How would you want, to react to these developments?
The two issues you raise, the challenges of the ordinary Nigerians and the challenges specific to the people, elderly people, it's all the same thing. It's all about the same thing. The present administration for the past 2 years and above have been telling us that they have a clear vision for making Nigeria great. And this clear vision entails a series of policies which they are implementing, that these are policies that ought to have been implemented earlier on, but that previous rulers were slow to do the needful. Now we have a ruler who is not only visionary, but also bold and courageous. They admit that the results, the outcome of their policies has led to unpopular feelings from the people. And that I'm trying to listen to them, that a good government should not be wanting to carry out popular policies, but rather policies that will work for the good of the nation. I've been listening to this, but apart from they themselves who are churning out these policies and the people whom they have recruited to carry it out, the vast majority of Nigerians don't seem to see it that way. They definitely don't agree that the government should be there to pursue policies that make life difficult for the people. No matter how beautiful your policy is, it should not make people's life miserable. But the promise of a beautiful life later, when is this later life coming? And how are we sure it is coming? There are many Nigerians who do not share the optimism they have about the outcome. I was listening to the television yesterday when our president was in
Ibadan.
Said exactly the same thing.
Talked about the pain of surgery.
That we have been saved. He agrees that we have put us in pain for the past 2 years. We have probably 2 years more. But that now we are at the end of the tunnel, and the good things are now coming. What are these good things that are now coming? Those who are economists cannot share this optimism. And that is why we believe that whatever policy a president or a regime may be having, the good of the people must be the center of attention. People must be the center of your attention. We are talking of people unable to feed their families. We are talking of unemployment rampant. We are talking of young people who have lost hope in the nation. Because this line you say you are taking, they cannot see it. They cannot see any light at the end of the tunnel, which is why many of our young boys and girls who can make it are leaving the nation for destinations that are only in their minds, but which, unfortunately, we know is not necessarily going to make things easy for them. When young people begin to run away from their nation, it's not a good sign now. Because young people should be able to see in the government sign of a better future. They are not seeing it. And so, I think, I remember making it very clear, if we are going to have a free and fair election, this regime must change its policies. Otherwise, you can't expect Nigerians to want you to continue beyond 2027. But I'm not seeing any reaction in that direction. The opposition parties that are revving towards the election, they are saying the same thing, that the policies we have now are in the wrong direction. I'm not sure I see clearly in them what the alternative they are proposing for Nigerians will be, except to say we will reduce your pains. How? We need to see it more
in more graphic details.
Yes, in more details. Yes. But maybe we have 1 year and a half now to see all that. I've been in this country now, and I'm now 81 years old, and I was already an adult when we became independent in 1960. I was in Patafo Abalewa Square when we raised up our flag for the first time that evening, 1st of October 1960. I was in Form 4 in college and in Benue State, and I was sent by my school to represent my school at the independence. We were full of confidence in our nation. That now we are going to be independent. We are going to be like the great nations. The great nations we knew then were England, Germany, America, France. Those countries we're hoping to become like them. We're not hoping to become like South Africa because we know South Africa was under apartheid. But we believe that just give us 10 more years, maybe 20, we will be in the front line. That has not happened. 60 years ongoing. 60 years going. But I still have not lost confidence in the ability of our nation to be among the frontline nations of the world. Because I think the way the material is there. We can now see how many of our brains have actually left Nigeria because Nigeria has no room for them. And wherever they go, they are performing wonderfully. Now, while we thank God for that, we still ask, these brains should be here now. They should be building here instead of building other people's nations. Go ahead, take anything. But we're talking about my health. The number of Nigerian doctors that are curing people in other nations. While in Nigeria, the hospitals have no doctors. The ones they have are on strike because they are not being treated well. It doesn't make sense now. It doesn't. And when they are sick, the people who are in charge of us, they are always going out. For how long? Isn't it a shame that the president of Nigeria should be going out for treatment? Can't even fix up a clinic in the estate house to take care of Mr. President. What does it take? The only thing it takes is a political will. There was probably all those who started the federal medical centers in, I think it was in every state or in every geopolitical zone. That was the idea. That at least if we cannot make every hospital good enough, let's have a few that we can rely on. And there's no reason why we shouldn't have been able to have it. They were built for that purpose. The National Hospital was built to be a center of excellence. Well, people go there now not to. The only thing left there are the structures, but even the equipment have. And the doctors that used to be there, politicization has overtaken the place. It's a shame. So we have so many things that could be done differently. And when the present regime came, the things they are doing differently don't seem to be differently in the right direction. One would expect to have things much better. I have people who are coming here to beg They were the old people, the normal good beggars whom we know. But we're having a fresh set of beggars now. People who never begged before. And now,
I know it's because of the situation and conditions of the country.
Yeah. Apart from those who had the jobs but don't have job anymore. They have lost their jobs. And it is terrible for a responsible gentleman. You have your family, looking after your wife and children, and suddenly you are unable.
And Your Eminence, the other thing that really worries Nigerians is when a government says, oh, we need to sacrifice, we need to, contribute. And then people say that the government is not leading by example. I was watching TV too a few days ago, and a young person was arguing that our president says we should, sacrifice. And he's buying a new jet, and he's globetrotting, and the ministers fly first class, and so many things going wrong. Another thing they talk about is corruption that is still endemic 2 years after we have a new government.
Not only endemic, but growing. We are no longer talking of stealing of millions. It's always trillions now that have been stolen. Billions and trillions. Which really has no reference to the reality of the people who are told to make do with a minimum wage of 70,000 naira a month that is not even being paid. Now, my regular drugs for BP and sugar is costing no less than 50,000 every month. If I was on a 70,000 naira pension, how will I manage? And I'm told that many people who had been on those medications before, when it was costing about 20,000, 15,000 a month, they can no longer afford it. And we are not surprised that every now and again we hear this one has dropped dead, that one has dropped dead, because they'll try and look for alternatives. They buy other cheaper drugs which are not currently doing the job, or they go for a boo, or all kinds of native herbs. Well, we are not supposed to have a nation that will make us live forever, but at least let us live decently for a reasonable length of time in this world. And that is what we are still waiting for. As for the lifestyle of government, it's not only that have been carved for themselves by the members of the National Assembly. Up to now, we don't have a clear picture of the exact amount of money each takes home every month, but they say it's nothing less than 10 million every month for each of them taking home. And none of them is complaining about that. And they know that the minimum wage is 70,000. What? Are we in the same country? The result is that those who should be taking of the ordinary Nigerian are not feeling the kind of pressure that is on them, which explains the quality of discussion you get in the National Assembly. They are not discussing things that concern the ordinary Nigerian. There are all kinds of fanciful projects that they are talking about, and the government sends all kinds of fanciful bills. That is, and they congratulate. We are congratulating ourselves every now and again with nice statistics that we say we have GDP has increased, that we have cleared all our debts, and blatant, is it untruth or lies? I don't know how to call them. The things that are being said that are not really true, but we are supposed to take it like that. You cannot run The nation cannot survive very much on that. Like I said, are we going to have a free and fair election? If we are going to have a free and fair election, then 2037 should give us opportunity to pass our judgment on how this government has treated us. And we need to have alternatives presented to us for us to move forward without killing and destroying ourselves.
I'm glad you brought this conversation here, because one of the challenges in Nigeria is how we recruit those that occupy public offices. And this is about the third time you've said this in this interview. I wish that we have a free and fair elections.
Yes.
What will be your suggestion for us to have a better process of recruiting those that lead our country?
Simple. That the body that should be organizing the election should be free and independent, as the name suggests. Now we have an INEC that is not independent. Certainly, that has been, for as long as the INEC is constituted by government, and the government that is party to election, how do we expect to have a free and fair election? How do we expect to have a free and fair election? But we are hoping too that the judiciary will help to be fair and impartial. But we are finding that the judiciary is getting more and more hooked up by the executive. So it's no longer a free arm of the government that we're expecting. And we saw that in the last election. The effort they made to explain to us why the election we had was a wonderful one. And all the arguments, all the evidence that shows plainly the irregularities were swept away, were not accepted, were not acceptable. And we're supposed to, even those of us who are not lawyers, we're asking, for goodness sake, what is happening here? Now, I think, I don't know, what I'm hearing is that according to our constitution, it is the National Assembly that should put forward suggestions to improve
the constitution,
the electoral laws.
Electoral laws, okay.
But that the present National Assembly as constituted is made up of people who are there through taking advantage of the loopholes in our constitution for elections. And they don't want to block those loopholes. They want the constitution to continue to be what it is now, so that you don't have to depend on the people's will to get into power, but rather continue with the system of political gerrymandering. Even the whole question of political parties has become a joke. And so we need to see how we can liberate the Independent National Electoral Commission from the control of government. We need to they need to open up the ground for participation in the elections in terms of political parties and independent candidates. When we talk of independent candidates, my mind is not going to an independent presidential candidate. My mind goes to independent candidates at lower levels.
The legislature.
And especially local government.
Local government.
Yeah, when you open the gate for the independent candidate, I can easily see a local government where a good man comes up and the people say, it is you we want to be our local government chairman, and you vote for him without reference to any political party. We need that. We need that. Our fight will go up towards the level of governors and presidents. It is time will say. But the technicalities of elections, one gentleman was talking on television today, said, okay, it's important, we will say that we should make sure that by law, electoral results will be transmitted in real time. Then he said, you can say that if you like, but if the INEC is not independent, even the technology will not be independent.
Gemini, some of the things you're suggesting will need a constitutional amendment.
That's what I'm saying.
And I am asking, we've been on this constitutional amendment by the legislature for decades, for so many years. A new legislature comes, they start the constitutional, they spend money, do this and do that.
They are on it now.
At the end of the tenure, nothing happens. Are you one of those who are saying there should be something like a constitutional conference, independent of the legislature as we have it now, the executive as we have it now, but a conference that will be all-encompassing for Nigerians to really say, this is how we want to be led?
The present rule in our constitution, which says this constitution can only be amended on the basis of the National Assembly, it is a decision that the Nigerian constitution has put there. But we do know that that's not the only way out. That's not the only way out. And we are also aware now that relying on that, we are not going to get us into, we are not be able to get a real change in our constitution, relying on the people who are presently in the National Assembly that are there on the basis of this warped constitution. It's a vicious circle. We are asking them to legislate themselves out of power.
And they're not interested in doing that.
Well, how should they be interested? In fact, the major element is that in Nigerian politics now is that you want to retain power by hook or by crook. To retain power, that is the important thing. Not even to govern. You can see that now that election is in 2027. The government that should be governing is busy already politicking.
Talking about 2027.
They are not talking about governance. They are talking about how we are governed. So, and people go into politics to capture power.
So how do we...
That has to change.
How do we convoke this kind of conference?
How that will change, I don't. How that will change peacefully, I don't know. How that will change peacefully, I don't know. It is possible for it to change peacefully. The only way it will change peacefully is if we have a government that decides to change things. And that is not as intent on holding power. We have been hearing severally a comparison being made between our present president and President Musa Yar'Adua. That when President Musa Yar'Adua was elected, he looked at the results. He won all right, but he says this is not a good election.
That there was something wrong.
There's something wrong with it. And he immediately set an independent group to look into the electoral process to change certain things. The so famous Waste Commission, which came out with some very important suggestions that have been put aside since then. Was that the mood of our present president after the long legal battle of the Supreme Court judgment. No. This is Emiloko. This is my turn. Has it become his turn? Only they know. Since when did Nigeria become what?
Turn by turn.
People take. Who are these people who are taking it now? Which turn? Whose turn is which turn? No? He still repeated the Emiloko philosophy in Ibadan this week. Yeah, that is just, and that he's enjoying it. They don't seem to see that this whole local philosophy cannot carry a nation forward. And after your turn, what happens? The next person can do whatever he likes. And unfortunately, Nigerians keep thinking that the only way to get equity is to zone political positions turn by turn. You are only playing into the hands of the politicians. They are the ones who are taking turns. The poor people are not taking any turns. The ordinary Yoruba man, I don't know whether he's very happy that his turn is his turn now, because he is not exempt from the pains that our turn is creating on the average Nigerian. I think when power and politics goes beyond personal positions, aggrandizement, and becomes politics is for service of the people and governance, good governance, we have to find a way of changing that mentality. How? I don't know, really, honestly. We can preach it. We have been preaching it. And in any case, that is what our church says politics should be. Our church says politics is a noble game, a noble art, because it's not even meant for everybody. It is for those who are competent, who have received the gift of God to be good managers of public affairs. And they go into it not minding their own personal interests. Said it clearly in our documents. Not minding their personal interests, but for the common good, all to the glory of God. Now, Nigerian politicians who enter politics with this attitude, they can't move. They are simply removed from the game. A few Nigerians who have gone into politics come back and said the thing doesn't work the way we think it should. In other words, things don't come according to the rules.
You know, when at some point in this interview I said that corruption in Nigeria is endemic, and you retorted, not only endemic, but growing.
Yes.
Does it worry you that...
It worries me now.
After all these years of effort...
It worries me, because with corruption, a few people will grow, will get plenty of money, they will buy buildings here in Asokoro, knock them down and build new ones. They will go to abroad and build new houses, but Nigeria will not move. Nigeria will not move. And there is a danger that if you continue like this, and sometimes we shall collapse. Like Amos was saying yesterday at Mass, in our readings about Amos, we will say they are enjoying themselves. They are having eating well, and they are living in nice houses, lying down on divans, and they are anointing themselves with perfumes, and they don't care about what is happening to the house of Joseph. It will happen unless before it gets too late we wake up, because the country cannot continue to sustain a level of corruption that is not manageable. To reach a stage where it will be too much now. Even those who think they have made money under corruption, they will not be in a position to even enjoy the money that they have.
That brings me to...
So it is not even in their interest.
That brings me to something you've been talking about recently, the insecurity in the country. We are really pained, especially by the level of kidnapping, which has gone to our children. School children are kidnapped in schools. There's so much insecurity. And when you talked about the rich making all the money, how are they going to enjoy it in this kind of insecurity?
They go around with a battalion of soldiers and police. They can afford to take that to themselves. They don't care about the rest of us. So they think that they are safe because they can send their wife and children to... They don't even go by road anymore. They don't even go by Airpeace or the ordinary airline. Everybody is now chartering private jets to move their family from one place to the other. They can enjoy it, but for how long? For how long will that go? The insecurity is a pity, because there's no reason why we should be so insecure. They keep telling us that the terrorists are difficult to control. Our soldiers are not trained for that kind of engagements. They are trained to confront soldiers that are in uniform and dress and so on. But I mean, if our soldiers are not trained to deal with the problems that we have, then train them now. Change the curriculum of the Defense Academy so that they can do the work that needs
and have contemporary studies of things that are happening in the country.
Yes, you cannot tell me that the soldiers on whom we are spending billions every year are useless for what we need. I mean, it doesn't make sense now. If the soldiers cannot deal with them, who is going to deal with them? Is it the so-called JTF, Joint Task Force of poor volunteers who are carrying their den guns and cutlasses and exposing their lives? It's again back to does the government have the will and the interest of the people as priority concern? If the interest of the people is not the priority of concern of government, then we're in trouble. No matter what policies you churn out, no matter what things you work out, what roads you build, like look at Federal Capital Territory. Every now and again, a new road is being commissioned by Mr. Wike, and the hospitals are public hospitals in the FCT. They're almost gone now, and even the schools too. The FCT schools used to be good. Now, nobody's talking about that. Because insecurity is linked with corruption, and it all boils down to bad government. And if you cannot change bad government by elections, how is it going to ever change? It means either it is changed by force or it collapses under its own weight. Whichever way is not the best way forward.
Your Eminence, we are rounding off. Time is never enough.
I'm already late,
when we are talking with you. But at some point in this interview, you said you're still hopeful, you still believe that Nigeria will get better. What fits this hope? What fits this?
Two things fits this hope. One is human, the other is divine. Divine because I'm a religious person. Human because I still see massive human resources in Nigeria, both among the young and among the adults. It will not take too long for Nigeria to make a turnaround if you have a good person and a good policy at the top. That's all you need to do. Because if that happens, even many of the diaspora will come back home to join in making the nation the great nation that we all want. The second point I said, which probably should be the first, is my trust in God, that He loves this nation. It is said that Nigeria is very religious, and when they say that, people say that more or less with like a kind of with a tongue in the cheek. But I say it seriously, that Nigeria religious says that Nigerians are always praying to God, and prayer to God is never useless. And that as Nigerians keep praying that God will save us from chaos, anarchy, and doom, it will happen. And how it will happen, maybe that's when we will see the hand of God. It can happen with a military coup, but it can also happen with a civilian ruler who suddenly turns things around, decides to turn things around. We shall see.
I know you actually said it when you talked about your doctors telling you need to slow down. I know you have retired. I know you're no longer doing your 9 to 7 job. I mean, your 9 to 5 or 9 to midnight job.
Last word. It's like you just said it now, that we are not losing hope in Nigeria. Yes. I'm still hoping that Nigeria will be on a better path before I die. If it doesn't come on a better path, I will see it from paradise when I go.
Your Minister,
thank you very much
for this opportunity.
God bless you. Thank you for coming.
And that's our program. We've been talking with His Eminence Cardinal John Onayeko. I'm Vin Martin Obiora Ilo in Abuja, Nigeria. Thanks for watching, and let's do this again soon. Yes.
The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister, Minister for National Security and the Public Service, and Minister for Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
President, we need a reset, and we need to reset. Mr. President, in your absence, I congratulate you on your assumption of this chairmanship of the General Assembly. We can wait. As I said, Mr. President, we need a reset, and we need to reset. Those of us here today representing our brothers and our sisters the world over have endured 4 years of polycrises. As the children of Mother Earth, we continue to wrestle with the climate crisis. As a human family, we grapple with the legacy of the pandemic. As a digitally connected people, we are now, regrettably, confronted by multiple theaters of war and scenes of horror and famine flowing from that war, armed conflict instead of pursued development. Citizens of every country as well, struggling to contain the rising cost of living and the implications for them and their families on a day-to-day basis. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, we are all now threatened by the second but silent pandemic of antimicrobial resistance, together with a growing incidence of death and disability from chronic non-communicable diseases. We cannot afford the distraction of war. If ever there was a time to pause and to reset, it is now. Collectively as an international community, and individually as leaders in each of our countries, we must now deliver new opportunities and solutions to these crises which dampen economic growth, which restrict the ambitions of our people and numb our sense of the beauty and goodness that the world ought to be offering because it has it to offer. The reset for which I am calling, and indeed all of our citizens are demanding, must see an end to all forms of discrimination. That rules and institutions today exist which create first and second class citizens, as we have said from this podium year after year, depending on your nation of origin, militate against the trust and the credibility and the hope, and it fosters a crisis of confidence in the existing international order, which must become inclusive and responsive for all. More than any other complaint from this podium has been the disparity in treatment and the inability to be able to have fair and transparent treatment for all that would lead to the trust necessary for us to solve the problems of our times that are truly beyond man-made causes. Neo-colonialist structures that perpetuate and reflect an old world order characterized by racism and classism and misogyny, while ignoring the legitimate aspirations of billions, will not help to foster the hope or trust that is necessary to meet these polycrises. We must ensure that the global institutions give developing countries, especially small vulnerable states like my own, or vulnerable middle-income countries, seats at the table of decision-making where we can be seen, heard, become active agents in our own cause, and lead our own development paradigms. My friends, we are reminded that 2024 is the final year of the United Nations Decade for the People of African Descent. Much has been achieved, but the recognition, the justice, and the development for people of African descent that was promised by this decade has, to say the least, not yet been fully realized. And it is for this reason that the Caribbean community joins the growing chorus, and my own country in particular, for the immediate proclamation of a second decade to complete the unfinished work and address the matter of reparations for slavery and colonialism. I start here because this is a necessary but complex conversation, and the Caribbean community is resolute that it must happen. Its resolution lies, and I want to be very clear, its resolution lies in a multi-generational approach, in the same way that the £20 million sterling debt that was incurred by the British government only was repaid in this 21st century, almost 200 years later, so that the notion of unaffordability becomes a non-issue once we recognize that the solution to reparations must be multi-generational and grounded in development. Mr. President, of necessity, the reset must also be characterized by institutional reform, which has to start in the United Nations councils. These councils suggest that some are full members, and others are only part members, and some may be part-time members, and some may be occasional members. All of this has no place in the 21st century. And the anger and the mistrust of our citizens and institutions, in leaders, in multilateralism and in the processes which exclude while yielding much talk and little action is very real. And nowhere is reform and consequentially trust and hope more important to the well-being of billions of people today than in relation to the global financial architecture. Restricted access to capital, its disproportionately high costs, barring us from doing that which we must, its inadequate scale, and the overwhelming burden of debt often imposed on us by circumstances beyond our control. These are all now combining to force governments in the world's poorest countries, and frankly, across many vulnerable middle-income countries, to devote more resources to debt service than to health and education, and in some instances, even infrastructure. For far too many members of the human family, cold ground is our bed and rock is our pillow. Too many go to bed with their bellies hungry, and too many may not even have a bed. Our reset must therefore collectively build a common agenda that reflects and reinforces our shared humanity. It is that shared humanity that binds us together. Mr. President, you know better than most. Our African brothers and sisters got it right with the principle of Ubuntu, and have used this principle, this General Assembly, to remind us that its simplicity is what we should aspire to. I am because you are. I am because we are. My well-being is tied to yours, and our collective well-being is connected to Mother Earth. This best voices the approach needed to give expression to the reset that is absolutely necessary. And we acknowledge that there are glimpses of hope. We have, for example, on Monday, agreed to a pact for the future, but we still have war. We have agreed on a global digital compact, but we still have raging pandemics in the slow motion silent pandemic. All of this rests, my friends, on the common agenda that the Secretary General had set out for us before. Yesterday, we agreed in a high-level meeting on a political declaration on antimicrobial resistance. A lot of fancy words, but this is where the rubber hits the road, because all of us in this room know people who have died from infections and for whom the antibiotics simply are no longer effective, so that within 48 hours, a person's life is snuffed out, almost as if they were at war. My friends, following on the intervention of the Bridgetown Initiative and the Paris Pact for People and Planet, the efforts of many across the board, we acknowledge that there is some hope. And it is evident in the beginnings of the reform, little by little, but nevertheless, they have started. These are all important steps, but we cannot take our eyes off the prize. Barbados' call for a fundamental reset includes attitudes and behavior as much as actions or reforms. Heads of government are in agree that we must trigger national development agendas of transformation with both speed and scale. We have a date with destiny against 1.5 degrees. We know that that is what is needed to survive. And the implications for people, even as we speak, can be dire. But if there is a failure to act with clarity of purpose, and if the political will retards progress on the front of the much-needed reform within the international financial institutions, purely because heads of government do not speak to ministers of finance when they reach Washington, D.C., or their board directors, if there is a need for that to be dealt with, then, my friends, there must be a commitment to be equal to the current challenges of member states if we are not to perpetuate the discriminatory practices that result in undermining the transformational opportunities that we need. Depriving vulnerable countries from being able to access concessional income that is long enough to build the resilience to save lives and to protect livelihoods is unjust. And that is why we must remain focused. That is why, my friends, we launched yesterday the third iteration of the Bridgetown Initiative, which identifies 3 key principles, very simply. 1, we must change the rules of the international financial system and reform its governance and instruments. 2, we must shock-proof vulnerable economies by dealing with debt and liquidity in a comprehensive, development-focused manner. And if we need to give countries a shot of liquidity like we give them a shot of adrenaline to avoid them falling off the cliff of death, then we must do so. And thirdly, we must augment financing by boosting country capacity to invest in resilience by several means, including what has been announced already, the rechanneling of special drawing rights through our multilateral development partners, but that will only be truly effective if there is another issuance of SDRs in the near future. Indeed, we must also address the challenge, and this I believe to be the fundamental mission of this generation, of how we are going to secure the global public commons to be able to maintain our safety and stability as a global community. We're going to have to discuss how we can secure it, and of course, how we must finance it. And that is not only the climate crisis or the loss of biodiversity that we speak about, but the other many global challenges that can truly destabilize countries and regions. Mr. President, these considerations are of fundamental importance to the sustainable existence of our generations, future generations. The SIDS agenda is another story of promises made but not kept. 30 years ago, the international community gathered in my own country to take action for the first time on the unique challenges faced by small island developing states. We birthed in my home country the first ever global agenda for small island developing states, which became known as the Barbados Program of Action. I thank Mauritius for its strategy of implementation, Samoa for its pathway. They were carriers of the baton of a development agenda for small island developing states in the intervening years, in the face of multiple global crises from health to climate to finance. The vulnerabilities, yes, of our countries as small states have become more pronounced. In May of this year, we gathered in Antigua and Barbuda for the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States. And I call on the international community and the multilateral system to let us work together to ensure that the promise created in Bridgetown in 1994 is delivered and realized through the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS 2024, otherwise known as ABBAS. Let me use this opportunity as well to inform you that 2 days ago we took over the presidency of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, the V20 countries of the world, from Ghana, whose president I would like to thank for the excellent stewardship of the group over the past 2 years, and indeed for the strengthening of its institutional capacity. The priorities of our term as chair of the V20 countries will be the multiple dimensions of climate crisis, dealing with them, the impact of the climate crisis on human health, and of course, the issue of debt and climate, because if we don't solve that, we cannot take the appropriate actions to deal with climate. I invite all United Nations members who are not yet members of the V20 but who are climate vulnerable to join this group, because it is only through amplification of our voices and consistency of our message and solidarity that we will continue to see the pace and scale of reforms that we need to be able to save our people's lives. I commend to you the declaration of the leaders of the Climate Vulnerable Forum that was adopted this week on Wednesday. Mr. President, above all else, we need a global reset on peace. There needs to be global peace. And those of us who are old enough would have recognized that there are peaks and valleys as it relates to this issue of conflict. There are few areas where the world is more in need of the United Nations acting as the United Nations to secure the objectives of the Charter than in the area of peace and security. The silence that has engulfed Sudan is unacceptable and may well be rooted in the racism that the world still carries as a badge of honor from the victories of the last great war of the World War II. The actions in Myanmar cannot continue. Ukraine has sucked more oxygen out of the global community and the global financial system than any of us can appropriately accept at the very time when the world needs to be applying its resources and efforts to fight in the greatest crisis known to mankind. And the spread of the war from Gaza to the consequences in the West Bank to now clearly what is happening in Lebanon as we speak with Israel, all of these are but the tip of an iceberg of death, violence, and instability, and robs the global community of oxygen and resources at the very time when we need it most in a strategic way. We all know, as students of history, that even the longest war in history came to an end. These wars, yes, they too will come to an end. But the question is when and at what cost, and without much loss of life, with how many children not being able to be either given the chance to live or will now live with memories of war that will affect their every action for the next 60, 70, 80 years of their lives. Innocent people are paying the price with the one thing that is theirs to give, and they don't give it willingly. It is their life. Unless we address the root causes of these wars, one by one, and the manners in which they are being sustained and financed, we will never, never know anything else other than war and rumors of war in these theaters. The transmittal of these scenes of horror in real time into people's bedrooms, into people's living rooms, will trigger two extreme reactions, neither of which are acceptable to us in the third decade of the 21st century. We will either get the desensitizing of ordinary people to the loss of lives, especially those of innocent children and women on the one hand, or we will get, on the other hand, the anger and inclination for vengeance that it spawns necessarily. We need peace. And it cannot be too difficult for us to work for peace. It is the same Bible that tells us in the stories of the Old Testament, much which has guided many people across this world. But when we turn from the Old Testament to the New Testament, it is Romans that says to us, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," not any country, not any human being, so that the Bible can't be used as a convenient aid when it suits us and rejected when it doesn't. In the midst of this maelstrom, we were very clear. My country took the step this year of recognizing and establishing diplomatic relations with the state of Palestine, in spite of having supported a two-state solution since 1969. And we did this because it is clear to us that the state and people of Palestine, human beings, are entitled to full recognition by integration into and support from the international community. The Charter does not say we the people, with the exception of any one group from any one part of the world. We join with others, therefore, in congratulating the state of Palestine in taking their seat among the United Nations member states as they did on the 10th of September of this year. And let me be clear, we condemn the actions of Hamas on October 7th. But we equally and strongly deplore the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, which is the result of the disproportionate use of force by Israel. There's no justification for it. And that is why treaties exist governing the rules of engagement for war. Because we as human beings learned better and know better and committed to better. A two-state solution, no matter how elusive it may appear to be now, is the only answer. And I've said already this week that we have known difficult battles in mankind's history. But when we were in it, we didn't think we could achieve it. But we did. We abolished slavery. We removed apartheid in South Africa. These battles are not beyond our creativity, our capacity, and our resilience to resolve them. Similarly, we insist that the killing in Ukraine really has to stop. The people of Ukraine must be allowed to live within the internationally recognized boundaries of their state in peace and freedom from the threat of use or force. And as I said, it is sucking too much oxygen out of the global financial system, and countries that should be the beneficiary of aid are being told that they may have to wait in the interest of the defense of others because of war. I say to us truly, there has to be a singular commitment to build a peace. Truly. Mr. President, my own region has not escaped the scourge of instability and violence. The Americas do not constitute today a theater of war. But we are today witnessing, for some years now, an unprecedented escalation in the number and caliber of assault weapons which are finding themselves in the hands of criminals who are wreaking havoc on the legal systems and our societies, particularly in the small island developing states of the Caribbean and indeed in the wider states of Central and Latin America. This scourge caused by guns manufactured in the United States of America primarily also requires a fundamental reset. The right of persons to bear arms in countries not engaged in military conflict should not be an opening to accept as legitimate the presence of assault weapons in countries. It is simply not right. There is no place for assault weapons in our societies. I turn now to the fate of the people of Haiti, which continues to be of major concern to our people in the Caribbean region. The global community now has an opportunity for an essential reset with how it addresses its relationship with Haiti, and which has been born in all kinds of semi and partial concern over the course of the last few decades. We continue to have it as a recurring decimal because we have failed to solve the problems and put them on a sustainable path to development for its people. What is needed is transformation of our sister nation. And yes, we must provide first and foremost security, but transformation must be its handmaiden. The government and people of Haiti need the full support of the international community, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And yes, this starts by extending the mandate of the Multinational Security Support Force, escalating the work of deploying all the tools of bilateral, regional, and global cooperation, not excluding countries who want to participate for spurious reasons, ensuring that those of us who can step up to the plate by significantly increasing the pledge funds that we do so, because we know a child can go about their day-to-day life without fear of being assaulted or killed or being denied the right to work because of their simple fear of walking the streets. The Caribbean community has been working hard this year to support our largest member state. And in the early part of the first few months of this year, we met on Haiti almost 3 to 4 times a week to guarantee the stability that we ask you now to help us secure. We thank the efforts of the Eminent Persons Group of former CARICOM Prime Ministers who were on the front line of helping to resolve this complex problem day in and day out, so that we could find a political consensus for Haiti. That Haiti had at this General Assembly both the interim president of the Transitional Council and Prime Minister Corneille is a remarkable achievement given where Haiti was in February of this year. Let them continue on a path, please, of securing their future. And we cannot be on this podium speaking about Haiti without thanking Kenya and President Ruto for their remarkable leadership. After many delays and in what represents now a historical precedent for an African country, they have ensured that an African country has taken the lead in helping to tackle the peace and security challenge beyond its own continent. That is the kind of reset that we need in the international community. And Mr. President, you cannot come on this platform, regrettably, although I look forward to the day when I will not have to say it, when we must ask for reprieve for the people of Cuba. It is unacceptable, it is unconscionable, and that it continues today is a mark on our international conscience. The Cuban people continue to face the most dire of economic circumstances, and that this is directly as a result of its exclusion and its designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. And I have addressed our only knowledge of terrorism, and Cuba is in fact the downing of the Cubana plane off the waters of Barbados, other essential workers when the global community needed it and when people needed to be liberated in Southern Africa. The reality is that we must have and continue to have resolve in calling for the embargo to be lifted, and we will condemn it year after year after year because it is simply wrong. As we say so, we pray that the people of Cuba, as they determine what damages they have found from Hurricane Helen, as well as we pray for the people of Florida, who clearly are going to spend the next few days identifying the damage as a result of a hurricane that hit Category 4 when it reached Florida. This is the climate crisis that we speak about. The people of Nigeria are still counting the bodies with respect to the floods that took place there. We have hard work to do. In our own Caribbean region, Beryl literally decimated the islands of Carriacou and Union Island, and indeed would have affected Grenada and St. Vincent more broadly. Jamaica and my own country's coastal infrastructure was significantly affected, with our fishing industry, 90% of it being decimated. This season of superlatives, with its floods and droughts, its hurricanes and fires, will take the lives and livelihoods of too many. The climate crisis is hitting us almost weekly across the globe. The deniers of the climate crisis, they too need to save our way of life and our planet. Mr. President, at the start of this week, the skies were much darker. I truly believe so. We are starting to see some glimmers of light. We leave New York this week noting that the clouds are lifting, conscious that the sun is peeping out in certain areas, not all, but in certain critical areas, giving us a sense of renewed hope that reset is in fact not only possible, but necessary in key areas: institutional reform, reform in our financial architecture, reform in how we view development, but above all else, reform in how we see each other and value each other. This hope springs from the Pact for the Future and the many declarations that we have made here, the terms in which my fellow leaders spoke from this platform for the most part, the urgent need to recognize reset, 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 even if they didn't call it by that name. It is as if we all truly understand and accept the challenge of rising to solve the major difficulties that are faced by the people of the world, and to recognize that global moral strategic leadership requires of us the commitment to redress the wrongs and to take care of saving people and planet. But recognition of the need for the reset, while it is the first step in any issue, what is now also needed is eternal vigilance as our companion, so that as we take the steps to transform attitudes and institutions and rules, we will not succeed overnight. We will not succeed even in the next decade. But if we don't do the reset to change the legacy of centuries of exploitation and domination, we will not be fit for purpose to meet the needs of our people in the third decade of the 21st century. I can think, therefore, of no better way to conclude than with a song that I had cause to use almost 30 years ago from my own country. Song from Edwin Yearwood when I first stood on this podium almost 30 years ago in 1995 as a young minister of youth. And I quote, "A voice in my head keeps talking to me. It tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and roll with the strife, for today is the rest of the start of your life." Mr. President, may the new hope fostered here this week signal the start of a new deal for people who hitherto were not seen, and even with the existence of this body, whose voice and presence were not felt. These people have been recognized too often, and these countries, as mere statistics, and not with the human dignity that is their birthright, or the human dignity that is the conferred right from these United Nations. Mr. President, I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Minister for National Security and the Public Service, and Minister for Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados.
Bright and early, as the day breaks, as the newspaper headlines trail the stories that shape the day, we at Signature TV trail the headlines that trail the day. We interrogate the headlines. We analyze the stories that make the headlines.
WAEC is overrated, and they even overrated themselves and went into CBT. They are insensitive of some Nigerian children who have never had what they call CBT.
With passion and emotion, we drive the conversation to change the narrative.
Let nobody be deceived by Nigerian high level of performing in agriculture export. We are still where we are.
Newspaper review on Signature TV every morning on Signature Morning, weekdays, and Signature New Day, weekends. Newspaper review on Signature TV. We do not just review the headlines, we make the headlines relevant to our daily lives.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Alexander Stubb, President of the Republic of Finland. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in its simplest form, foreign policy is really about three things: about values, interests, and power. I come from a relatively small country, Finland, and our toolkit is mainly about two of those three things. It's about values and interests. Power, hard or soft, is usually the luxury of bigger players. The power of smaller country arises from its capacity to cooperate with others. Smart diplomacy gives smaller player at least relative influence. The UN is, of course, case in point. Big players have power through their permanent membership in the UN Security Council. But we, the smaller players, can influence the ebb and flow of international relations by being active in the corridors of diplomacy. Now, most of the speeches that we've heard here today have highlighted the fact that the world order, balance, and dynamics are changing, much like they did after World War II when the UN was founded. I actually think that the post-Cold War order is over, but we don't know what the new order is going to look like. It will take at least 5 to 10 years for things to settle. And my message to this assembly today is that regardless of the size, each and every member state of the United Nations has agency, a say in how the new world order will look like. It is important that we all use this power wisely and responsibly. Now, I fully appreciate that our interests differ, depending on our geographical location, history, state of development, or culture. But fundamental values are something we should all share. We have commonly defined some of the most essential of them in the UN Charter. Today, I want to do two things. First, analyze where we are, and second, give my proposals on what we might want to do together. To understand what's currently happening in the world, I'd like to raise 3 different but yet related developments. First, it seems to me that there's a growing tension between multilateralism, in other words, an order based on the rule of law, and those that speak the language of multipolarity or transactionalism. So difference between multilateralism and multipolarity. Now, I can understand the temptation and the rationale of the proponents of multipolarity and transactionalism. But can they solve the world's biggest challenges, such as climate change or sustainable development? Today, I see many states, both big and small, pursuing transactional or multivectoral foreign policies. In essence, their aim is to diversify their relations with multiple actors rather than aligning with any one particular bloc. Now, this can be opportunistic, but it may also be justified and reasonable. This depends on political choices. A transactional or multivectoral foreign policy is dominated by interests. Interests drive practical choices of states, and this is entirely legitimate. This kind of foreign policy is based on a realistic understanding of power. Power defines the limits of what is possible for each state. However, values should actually underpin everything we do. Even transactional or multivectoral foreign policy should rest on a score of fundamental values. Without them, foreign policy will ultimately run into a wall. If you set aside values for unhindered pursuit of power and interests, you will eventually find before you the very same problems you wanted to overlook. Second, the balance of power in the New World Order is shifting towards the South and the East. Many countries, especially in Africa, Asia, Latin America, are becoming or have become key players in determining the direction of the New World Order. To put it simply, they have both agency and power. They are not only an expanding economic force, but their demographic growth is inexorable. This will also turn them into a political and cultural force. It will yield them both hard power and soft power, and they will use it to promote their interests as they should. The 193 members of the United Nations do not have to agree on every minute detail of values, but we have to have a common understanding of fundamentals. They include the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. They include the prohibition of the use of force and the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. These values are the building blocks of who we are and what we stand for as the United Nations. The broad international community has overwhelmingly an interest to uphold them. Let me be clear. Russia has no right to continue its aggression on Ukraine. Israel has no right to violate international law in Palestine. States have no right to use Sudanese or Congolese territories to fight proxy wars for their economic or strategic self-interests. I urge us all to heed this message of the international community and act accordingly. War is always a failure of humanity. It is a collective failure of our fundamental values. It is a failure of us as human beings. Thirdly, I would like to say a few words about the state of the United Nations, the institution where we are. The UN was created to maintain and promote peace, stability, development, and friendly relations among nations. In order to achieve this, the balance between the three elements was required. The power at the highest level was represented by the UN Security Council. The interests of the wider membership were reconciled here in the General Assembly, and the values were enshrined in the Charter and consolidated as rules of international law. Now, unfortunately today, the UN is struggling to break the rules of international law and to use force against other people's territories and suppress other nations. The United Nations of today does not sufficiently reflect the realities of the balance of power. All too often, it fails to serve as a forum for the coordination of interests, and the values at its core are too often not respected in good faith. We all want to have the freedom to make choices and a possibility to influence the world around us. Today, many countries are seeking answers in multipolarity or transactionalism. If the UN fails to deliver, this trend will accelerate. So, let me sum up in the terms of the three pillars: values, interests, and power. Our values can divide us. Fundamentally, however, they should unite us around the basic principles of humanity, the rule of law, and the prohibition of aggression. Our interests differ, and it's only right that we promote them. However, our choices have consequences. Opportunism will eventually be forced to confront the problems it tried to ignore. Power will constantly seek a new balance. We must adapt to change. Nevertheless, we should not allow the rise of hard power to blind us. The power of legitimacy, integrity, and rules will remain strong. So let me get to my second part, from the situation to possible solutions or things that we could do together. Never before in history has humankind had such means of innovations at its disposal to solve the world's most pressing problems. However, the current direction is wrong in so many ways. There are more wars than at any time since World War II. The world is becoming increasingly divided. And so are our societies, and the measures to deal with climate change and sustainable development are lagging behind. In different parts of the world, we're witnessing immense civilian suffering and blatant disrespect for humanitarian principles. For me as a Finn, Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine not only reminds me of our past, but is directly linked to the security of the part of the world where I live. On the other hand, there is aggression and total disregard for civilian life, and an attempt to undermine the fundamental principles on which the international order is based. On the other hand, there's a bastion of freedom that is defending its right to exist and to make its own choices. The battle for what consequences we will draw from this aggression is not yet over. Recently, there's been serious attempts at diplomatic solutions of the war on the initiative of the United States. There are no perfect solutions to wars. At the same time, we know that any decision made in these matters will have far-reaching consequences in Ukraine and beyond. There can hardly be a stronger unifying interest among the UN's broad membership than our opposition to the wars of conquest. Aggression must not be rewarded. Accountability for the most serious international crimes must be pursued. In the Middle East, civilians in Gaza are experiencing immense suffering. The deepening humanitarian crisis has reached unbearable levels and represents a failure of the international system. At the same time, Hamas continues to hold the hostages it has taken, and many have already lost their lives. An immediate ceasefire is needed in Gaza. That has been reiterated from this podium many times today and yesterday. Humanitarian aid must be granted safe and unhindered access. The hostages must be released. I commend the efforts led by France and Saudi Arabia to advance the two-state solution. The negotiations must meet the Israeli and Palestinian security needs and Palestinian right to self-determination, its legitimate aspiration for statehood and sovereignty. The occupation that began in 1967 must end, and all permanent status issues must be resolved. Correspondingly, the countries that have not recognized Israel must do so. At the same time, the international community must strengthen the Palestinian Authority for it to govern the entire Palestinian territory effectively. This is the only viable option for achieving a two-state solution. A stable Palestine will also significantly benefit the security of Israel. In many parts of the world, in Haiti, Myanmar, and Mali, among others, civilian populations continue to face famine and displacement at a large scale. And sometimes I feel that we end up looking at conflicts only that are near to us. But I think the job of the UN is to look at all of them with equal determination. I praise all those who, in good faith, continue to work for peace despite the daunting task. In June, a peace agreement was reached for the conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The true test, like with all peace agreements, lies in its implementation. Does it stick? There's a humanitarian crisis of alarming proportions that compels us, all of us, to respond. Peace processes should not be transactional. They must be guided by international law. All countries and stakeholders in the region must be engaged and committed to achieve sustainable peace. The presence and involvement of the UN is essential. I would also like to stress the crucial work carried out by journalists amid conflicts and in other difficult circumstances. Attacks on members of the media are unacceptable. Media freedom is the basis for democracy. It is a prerequisite for an open society. The ability of the press to carry out its work is important for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, the composition of the UN still largely reflects the world of 1945. As the world has changed drastically, so should the decision-making at the UN. Last year, in this very hall, I argued for a reformed Security Council, a council where currently underrepresented regions would have a stronger voice through permanent seats at the table. The number of permanent members should be increased in the UN Security Council. At least there should be 2 new seats for Asia, 2 for Africa, and 1 for Latin America. I think I'm going to say this every year because it's the only place where I get applause. No single state should have a veto power. And if a member of the Security Council violates the UN Charter, its voting rights should be suspended. I believe that these changes at the top of the UN are necessary in order to maintain the UN's central role in international relations. At the same time, a more comprehensive reform of the UN is needed. I commend the Secretary General for his UN 80 initiative, and I encourage him to take bold and ambitious action. So Finland strongly supports the UN and wants it to succeed. Therefore, we stress the need for true reform to enhance the organization's credibility, relevance, and efficiency. This will ensure that the UN can act. The UN needs to focus its efforts on its most important goals: ending and preventing wars, protecting human rights, and acting as a catalyst for sustainable development. And also, we need to get the UN back into peace mediation. I would argue that one of the reasons that we have so many wars right now is that the UN is absent from peace mediation. No other organization can offer the legitimacy comparable to that of the UN. If the UN is absent, conflicts are not resolved without it, which is not in our common interests. The UN is needed as a mediator, and the member states should support it at this endeavor. Finally, Finland is strongly engaged in the work of the UN and will remain so. Therefore, we're also standing for election to the Security Council for the term of 2029 to 2030. Should we be elected, Finland pledges to be a principled and pragmatic partner for peace. We are principled in our commitment to international law with the Charter at its core. We are pragmatic in seeking solutions that truly advance international peace and security, recognizing that progress is often incremental. At the outset of my speech, I said that each and every one of us has agency, a say how the new world order will look like. We want to be able to make our own choices and have an impact on the world around us. Nelson Mandela saw truth and reconciliation as the only hope for nations that are bitterly divided. The same applies to relations between states. We should learn from history, but always look to the future, bearing in mind that our decisions will shape it. Thank you very much.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Health is more than a diagnosis. It's your lifestyle, your choices, and your future. Join us on Inside Health, your weekly deep dive into the stories, science, and solutions shaping your well-being. From expert interviews to real-life journeys of healing and hope, we cover it all.
One of the complications of cancer management or treatment is they have some of them at one point in time, you see them having anemia. Okay, so you see them at times being transfused. But at the same time, you come in with a diet.
Nutrition, mental health, innovations in medicine, fitness, and everyday wellness. Whether you're managing a condition, staying informed, or just living your best life, Inside Health is your trusted guide.
I'm Tigiti Agorum, and I'll be with you every week on Inside Health, only on Signature TV.
New every morning on Signature TV, we open the day for you with needed energy, information, and required vibes to shape your day. From sizzling snippets of stories in various areas of life to intriguing conversations with net worth guests.
When you have people who have no track record becoming your leaders, you have a problem.
There's no outstanding gratuity when Obi took over from me. I left, in all the accounts of Anambra State, 13.8 billion for him.
Your day cannot be complete without Signature Morning on weekdays and Signature New Day on weekends. There is no better way to start your day except Signature Morning and Signature New Day every day on Signature TV. We are local.
The international community is observing every
Why the main market is in chaos. People are...
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye. Aye.
We have taken the vote by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket. Bright and early as the day breaks, as the newspaper headlines trail the stories that shape the day. We at Signature TV trail the headlines that trail the day. We interrogate the headlines. We analyze the stories that make the headlines.
WAEC is overrated, and they even overrated themselves and went into CBT. They are insensitive of some Nigerian children who have never had what we call CBT.
With passion and emotion, we drive the conversation to change a narrative.
Let nobody be deceived by Nigerian high level of performing in agriculture export. We are still where we are.
Newspaper review on Signature TV every morning on Signature Morning weekdays and Signature New Day weekends. Newspaper review on Signature TV. We do not just review the headlines, we make the headlines relevant to our daily lives.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
bright and early as they make the headlines.
Quiet is overrated, and they even overrated themselves and went into CBT. They are insensitive of some Nigerian children who have never had what is called CBT.
With passion and emotion, we drive.
Filed by a colleague, Bright against his conviction by a magistrate court in Enugu State. The prolonged delay in determining the appeal gives an impression of a deliberate effort to ensure that his appeal is never heard. It is disturbing that the matter which initially reached judgment stage was truncated on the very day of judgment because the judge refused to deliver judgment and proceeded to recuse himself. Owing to the public outcry and the long delay in assigning the matter to another judge, the matter was assigned to another judge, who unfortunately, on the 23rd of September 2025, recused himself yet again. It is beginning to look as if there is a concerted effort to ensure that the appeal is ever heard, so that Bright Ngene will serve the full term imposed on him by the court. If this is indeed true, then this is not the face of justice we want to present to the world.
Ngene's legal troubles dates back a 2017 community dispute in his community, Apuke, where he and a co-defendant were accused of misappropriating community development funds. Ngene's spokesperson, Ben Kachuku, confirmed that Justice Enu Oleido is the fifth judge to withdraw from the case. He described the continuous stretching of the trial as politically motivated, insisting that while Ngene's co-accused has been freed, Bright's case remains unresolved.
So I don't know how many the number of judges that they want this case to go through their table before this. Like I've always said, we want justice. If Honorable Bright Emeka Ngene committed the crime of stealing the 15,750,000 naira from this community purse, let the punishment as that is equating that law be meted out on him. Everybody will go fine. But when you have not been able to prove it, it shows that there is a hand of, is it Esau and voice of Jacob.
In a telephone interview, Ngene's wife, Mrs. Munachi Ngene, recounted how her husband's file has been moved from one judge to another, even returning to Chief Judge ENUGU just 24 hours after being handed to Justice Nwobodo. She appealed to the state government to intervene in the matter, lamenting the toll his incarceration has caused the family, especially her husband's ailing mother.
I don't know what is happening, but all I know is that God, they are not above God. They may say they are somehow above Bright, but there is God in heaven that is still interested in the affairs of men. And at the due process, at the due cost, he will do something for us.
Ma, you say you don't really know what is happening, but some persons say that it's politically motivated.
Yes, of course.
Why do you say so, Ma?
Because when you talk about theft and conspiracy, available offense. Why are you delaying it? Why are you not granting him bail pending appeal?
Human rights lawyer Barrister Maxwell Ora described the prolonged delays as unjustifiable. He commended Justice Oluedo for stepping aside rather than risking an unfair judgment and maintained that ENUGU has capable judges who can deliver justice if given the chance.
Like the judge that just recused himself from Bright Ngene's case must have personal reasons to do that. And I think that is the best, because it is wrong for a judge to continue in a matter and at the end of the day do injustice in that case and give perverse judgment. So, but I will be urging the chief judge as a matter of urgency to assign that case to other judges. We have serious, courageous judges in ENUGU. I may mention but a few names. I know that Honorable Justice Eya, if this case is given to Honorable Justice Eya, he will deal with this case decisively. Within 3 months, he has dealt with this matter. I know that if you give this case to Justice Obuabo, he will deal with this matter decisively. We have other judges. C.I. Nwobodo is there. There are judges that will deal with this matter. I don't know why they are just rigmarole.
All attempts by Signature TV to secure an interview with the state chief registrar proved abortive as he declined to comment on the matter. As the case file continues to be transferred from one judge to another, the cry for justice grows even louder. And for the people of Enugu South Urban Constituency who have effectively been denied representation in the state's legislature, expectations are high for an expeditious resolution in a fair and equitable manner in Enugu. Chinemere Mikebunam, Signature TV News.
It was a moment of joy and gratitude to God in Enugu State as family, friends, associates, and other dignitaries gathered to celebrate the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Dr. Kingsley Ude, following his elevation to the prestigious rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria, SAN. Signature TV correspondent Chinemerem Ikebunam was at the event.
The city of Enugu came alive over the weekend as the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Dr. Kingsley Ude, held the Thanksgiving ceremony in celebration of his recent conferment as a Senior Advocate of Nigeria, one of the highest honors in the legal profession. The event began with a holy mass at Christ the King Parish, GRA Enugu, where the Bishop of the Enugu Catholic Diocese, Most Reverend Callistus Onaga, led the congregation in prayers of thanksgiving, blessing Dr. Ude and his family for these remarkable achievements.
Brother Attorney General, since you will start from here, the source of his strength. Well, not that way. Sounds are more brilliant or more sound than many others, but they are brilliant and sound. There are very those legal practitioners that are doing so well. They are brilliant and sound. Some of the lawyers that I said who are very brilliant, some lawyers that I see him say, my own sound. I call it my own sound. It is not yet an official side, it is my own side. Because of his way of deliverance, the way of courage, it matters and laws.
From the church, the celebration continued at Enugu State International Conference Center, where traditional rulers, judges, legal practitioners, local government chairmen, top government functionaries, family members, and friends gathered to rejoice with the new silk. Governor Peter Mba, in his remarks, commended Dr. Ude for bringing pride to Enugu State, describing his elevation as a recognition of hard work and excellence. The governor thanked all guests for honoring the occasion and proposed a toast to celebrate the new SAN.
Let us raise our glasses to celebrate a worthy ambassador and a distinguished son of Enugu State. Congratulations, our brand new seal. Congrats. We couldn't be any prouder. Thank you so much. Thank you for ennobling this occasion with your presence. Thank you so much and God bless you all. Thank you.
In an emotional speech, the celebrant Dr. Kingsley Ude expressed deep gratitude to God Almighty for his grace and to the governor, Peter Mba, for the opportunity to serve as the Attorney General, a role he described as instrumental to his professional growth and recognition. He reflected on his journey as the son of a respected justice in Enugu State, describing his elevation as a fulfillment of purpose and a call to higher responsibility.
I feel really delighted that the elevation to the Senior Advocate of Nigeria is being celebrated not just by my family but by the government and the people of Enugu State and all well-wishers across Nigeria and even beyond. The elevation to the rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria was a process, very tedious process, but we are committed to following the process. And that's my advice to the younger ones. Let them commit to following the process of attaining to whatever dream they have.
As friends, colleagues, and well-wishers poured out tributes and goodwill messages, the atmosphere reflected a deep sense of pride, not just for the man of the moment, but for Enugu State, which continues to produce shining examples in law, leadership, and public service.
Because the Commissioner for Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, he deserves it. He deserves it actually. He's a very humble man who started from somewhere and got to this stage. Enugu State is proud of him, Nigeria is proud of him, and the sitting government is proud of him.
We continue to pray for our brother
and his family. We continue to wish you the best of God in your sojourn, because this is the beginning of your sonship. And we pray that God will continue to lead you, give you more wisdom, not to pilot the affairs of Enugu State and your sonship. Thank you and God bless.
From the church to the conference center, it was a day that celebrated excellence, humanity, and divine grace. With his new silk, Dr. Kingsley Ude San not only joins the League of Nigeria's finest legal minds, but also reinforces Enugu State's reputation as a cradle of excellence. In Enugu, Chinemere Mikebunam, Signature TV News.
Residents of Nike, Enugu are excited with the ongoing reconstruction of the Nike Road being executed by the Enugu State government. Not even the recent closure of the last bus stop portion of the road could diminish the joy. Some of the residents who spoke with our correspondent say that the temporary suffering is worth it.
Road transportation remains the backbone of commerce in Nigeria. According to data from the National Bureau of Statistics, over 90% of goods and passengers are moved by road. Yet, many of these roads are in poor condition, making delivery times slow, increasing fuel costs, and reducing the lifespan of vehicles dramatically. The Enugu State government, as part of its plan to improve road infrastructure in the state, embarked on the dualization of the road. From Abakpa Nike to Uguogo down to Nsukka, some residents expressed their excitement about the ongoing project.
This bridge, this project has disturbed us well here for a long time. Many governors have come for it, but didn't do it like this one is doing it now. So I'm very appreciative for what our governor is doing.
Human being, I lost 3 human beings here, both 2 school students and the one Balo pusher. Yes. So this is if you